A lot of the traders are talking about the reversal in the corn market today and the bull spreading and what that could mean going forward from here as we get set up for tomorrow, as we get close to winding down these markets for this Tuesday. So let's look at the corn market and see if we're still a nickel higher, and we are. The May up 5 1/4 cents now, 3.48 3/4. We've gotten as high as 3.50 1/2, so we've been even higher than this. At one point, the July's up 4, the new crop December's up 2 1/2 cents, 3.66 3/4. May soybeans now on the higher side by 1 3/4 at 8.85 3/4. Remember, this is a market that started out with weakness today as well. July up 1, and that new crop November up 2 1/4 at 8.74 3/4. Look at the Chicago wheat, though. It continues to fall, going the other direction. July down 5 3/4 at 5.50. Kansas City wheat market, well, it tried to gain earlier, but now it's on the lower side by 3.5 cents at 4.89 3/4. Brian, let's visit with you here for just a moment here and get your thoughts on all of this. Brian Hoops is with Midwest Market Solutions. And so your thoughts here, as we've seen this corn market really come back from behind, and it looks like soybeans are now trying to make a comeback, but it's slipping away from wheat. Is there some money moving around here?
Yeah, good afternoon, John. Good to talk with you. We are seeing a little bit of buying interest coming in this corn market with an outside day higher being charted. There's some talk that after China purchased a large amount of U.S. corn on Friday of last week, they are negotiating with the U.S., continuing to work out details of the Phase 1 agreement, and that has led to some speculative buying in the July corn contract. I think, overall, we're going to need this type of demand because we're going to lose a couple 100 million bushels of ethanol demand with the plants that are shutting down or idling right now, and that's going to increase our old crop ending stocks. But good to see the corn market trying to come to life in here. We found buying interest below that $3.50 a bushel level in the July contract.
Brian, we've been talking a lot about how coronavirus has affected the crude oil market. Crude oil has affected the ethanol market. Ethanol has been affecting the corn market. All of this is tied together, but we can't lose sight of the report that we're going to have out next week that has the crop production, those anticipated numbers for planting that everybody's been talking about all month long. And then also that will have our quarterly grain stocks report in it as well.
Yeah, that usually is a pretty key report. The supply and demand report in March is usually subdued, and it certainly was this year. But as you look ahead to next week's numbers, everyone is expecting increased corn acres, 95, 96 million, and about 85 or so million acres of soybeans being planted. I think that may be our high acreage number planted for corn for the year. With these ethanol plants that are shutting down, it may shift a little bit of that intentions to plant corn over to soybeans. We got to have a home for all this corn that we're going to grow. If we plant that many millions of acres and we have a normal yield, we're going to have a huge amount of corn. We got to have those markets either to export it, to feed it to animals, to convert it into ethanol. And we may, as I said, shift a little bit of that acres back over to soybeans. And if, soybeans have been rallying here pretty decently up until today against the corn market, prices also may benefit to plant soybeans versus the corn.
Well, and that strong dollar's got to be considered as well. We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us. The livestock trade is coming up next here on the Marketing Report. Straightforward we go to the live cattle market. Now, we haven't traded big numbers of cattle yet. I think I saw something like 170 head in Iowa yesterday. So as far as big amounts of cash cattle trade, not yet. We're going to talk to Brian about that in just a moment. April live cattle up the limit, 450, 106.15. June up the limit, 97.03. Over in the feeder cattle market, March is up 463 at 129.85, but it's near the end of its lifespan. April is up 675, up the expanded limit, 130.07. May up the limit. And in the lean hogs, April up 133 at 65.90. May up 178 at 65.65. Brian, I was interested to see that yesterday, the show list, I don't think the ink was even dry on the show list yesterday. And all of a sudden, we've got packers out there already bidding for cash cattle this week. What are you hearing? What do you think is behind all of this? What do you think the feedlots are thinking?
Yeah, they certainly need some of the product. You know, if you go into your grocery store locally, there's hardly any meat to be found anywhere, and so they're ramping up kills, trying to meet that demand. They have huge margins to work with, as well as boxes have been moving higher. We did slow down a little bit at midday, but the cash trade is going to be, I think, sharply higher later this week. We're already hearing bids in 115 to 120. Last week's cash trade was probably close to 110, so we're looking at a minimum of $10 increase in the cash markets, and it could be more than that by the time we get to the end of the week.
What about the northern cattle? Is there any word yet on where they're thinking about trading those cattle there in the north? We saw just that light handful yesterday in Iowa at 180, but that wasn't the bulk of the trade.
No, certainly not. In fact, we saw some bids at 188 in Nebraska being passed this morning. So there's a lot of optimism. I think if you're a feedlot, you're looking at getting some of this share of the higher cash markets this week, some of this demand that they see, and Packer margins going to be shared with the feedlots, and they are looking at, this is an opportunity to gain some of this back.
Okay, Brian, we're going to have you back tonight on the Rural Evening News and wrap all of this up. The cash cattle trade, as we mentioned, kind of quiet, dress basis, about $10 higher on some of those. The cash live hogs just kind of mixed the carcass basis up just a little bit. And so that's where things stand. Let's look at crude oil one more time here because that has been such an interesting market. We're kind of mixed right now. The May down 14 pennies at 23.22, but the June up 7 at 25.55. Janet, back to you.